I remember a long time ago when I was watching the Sopranos. At the time it was on, you didn't have Facebook or nothing like that, but there were certain message boards, like on the Internet Movie Database, there were a couple other message board sites where, when he was driving in from the city in the very first, in the opening credits, everybody was trying to, you know, grab how many. Everybody was trying to spot how many landmarks or how many familiar locations they could come up with at once. It only lasted for a little while because, it was the same scene every time. But I remember one particular episode with crystal clarity because it sent me down kind of an interesting trip, where he's talking about, the main character, Tony Soprano, is talking about his panic attacks and his passing out, and he makes an association when it comes to food, and he's talking to his doctor, Dr. Melfi, played by Lorraine Bracco, and then she's telling him to go deeper a little bit into his background, and somewhere along the way he's talking about his very first panic attack when he was a young guy. He saw his father chop off some guy's little finger. There was a little associated memory there when he passed out. But the thing that stuck in my mind during that one episode, and this, I can't remember the season or anything like that, but it would have had to have been early 2000s because I was still living in the Northeast Coast at the time. But she mentions Marcel Proust. Marcel Proust, the writer, the French writer, and he had like a Madeleine or something like that. I don't know what those are, right? I'm guessing it's like a cookie. But it was in his tea. And the author said in one of his books that when he ate the Madeleine that had been soaked in tea, it set off a chain reaction of memories, and it put him back at a certain moment in time. And then the reason I remembered that was because it stuck out to me enough that I said, well, I'm kind of curious. I'm going to go read what Marcel Proust wrote. It was from a series of 7 different books. It wouldn't be the kind of thing I would recommend to anybody to read necessarily if you're looking for a story, like in terms of a cohesive plot that's got some kind of purpose to it or something like that. It's more like reading somebody's observations. One reason that I read them all, I was fascinated by the fact that I could get a glimpse into a point of view from someone from a particular time period. That's always been a weird fascination of mine. Like when it comes to a certain event in history, like any event you want to mention, because history fascinates me. Like when I would see something from the Victorian era, when I'd see one of those creepy photographs or something like that, there was always a part of me that was always curious. Well, what would an average Victorian person on the street, if you had a man in the street interview with one of them, if you'd ask him, hey, what do you think of these post-mortem photographs that I found so unsettling? Or, hey, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of that? It was something that hit me a long time ago that when it comes to history, we know events. We know, the men that were at the top of the events, but we don't know very often what it would have been like for an average person experience in the event. Like, for example, what would an average, ordinary, tax-paying Roman have thought of the Senate and the Empire, if you could have got a man on the street interview with him. So I was fascinated by it only for that purpose alone. I was getting a viewpoint of someone who lived in France in the 1800s, and I was getting a first-person, feedback from him, and I found that really fascinating. But that started me on a little bitty interesting trip with something, because at the time I remember it was October, and I remember every single AA meeting I'd go to, they'd talk about, well, it's the fall of the year, and this is a bad time for alcoholics, and everybody's going to probably relapse, and there'll be millions of white chips, and most people, there'll be a lot of deaths and suicides after, before New Year's even rolls around. I remember one particular group I was sitting in at the time, they said we had 5 people kill themselves last October. And I thought, I never did understand how them trotting out all these horrifying failure stories was supposed to inspire me to have any confidence in what they were, in their program or whatnot. But at the time, I remember thinking about Proust and his Madeleine or his cookie or whatever the fuck it was, and I got to thinking about the fact that and I'm talking about a long time ago. I'm not talking about at the end of my drinking career when I was just drinking a whole lot of cheap-ass vodka because I could afford it. where, if I woke up in the middle of the night, I could reach under the bed and I could grab some vodka, or, when I'd wake up in the morning vomiting and throwing up. I'm talking about before it got that bad for me. Every October, I would have this funny urge to drink bourbon, and I didn't know, I never really thought about it, but reading Proust actually kind of got me pondering on that. Why was bourbon so important in October? Why is bourbon so important around the holidays? What is there about bourbon in October? Not in an inventory kind of way. It was just kind of an interesting little mind game I was doing with myself, and I realized in life is more multifaceted and complex. Like in the TV series The Sopranos, he has one particular memory, and boom, that's why he has the panic attacks. That one memory associated with that one event. I mean, it's not really, reality never is like that. At least for me, it's not. But there were a plethora of different things that would happen when I was younger in October, and there was an association between the taste of bourbon and those memories, and it got me to thinking about a few other things. Like at the time, there were certain beers that I would drink. If you saw me drinking a beer, you usually knew it was kind of early in the morning and I had a hangover and I had stopped at a gas station on the way to the liquor store and I was trying to get a beer down before, but when I would taste that particular beer, it would put me right there. Like every time I would swallow that particular brand of beer, the first thing that it would do to me is I would feel, hungover going to a gas station on the way to the liquor store, and it would put me right there in that exact moment. It was kind of like even certain movies that I've seen that I don't tell people, well, those are my favorite movies, because they'd probably say, well, those aren't very good movies. They're not very good movies necessarily, but when I watch those movies, I'm 22 years old again, and I'm over here, or I'm 25 and I'm doing this, or I'm driving a cab, in New York, one of my first jobs. I'm doing this when I hear this song or when I see this movie or whatever it is. And it got me to thinking about correlations between, necessarily alcohol cravings or and things of that nature that would send me, that would send me off necessarily on certain drunken spirals. Now, I'm not saying that some Halloween decorations went up in the window and that was a trigger and I had to go booze, I had to go booze up because of those. I was just noticing the odd effect that associative memories had with so much of my own behaviors, including a lot of other things. And I noticed that actual cravings in AA are never addressed in those kinds of objective terms. It's always looked at as you did something bad, you had a resentment, you turned your back on God, you didn't do a fourth step, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. That's why you had a craving, that's why you drank, which I'm not saying for every craving I can account for it as having an associative memory, because there's just been some days I woke up and I just said to myself, today it'd just be a really good day to get kind of loaded. Although I do think that there was more at play when I had time to sit and think about it, actually think about it in a way that wasn't, the cult would have been upset if they'd known I was thinking in these kinds of terms, but I was like, I just kind of wonder if certain things I do in life, if certain activities I do in life, if certain behaviors I have in life is not just a result of me programming myself to do those things. It was kind of like, at one point in my life before the drinking really got completely, totally out of control, there was this feeling of, okay, it's Friday night, I gotta be getting loaded. It's Saturday, I gotta be getting loaded. I'm going to this party, this event or whatever, I gotta be getting loaded. It was almost like a programming kind of thing, that when I didn't have, when Friday nights rolled around and I didn't have anything else to do but not get loaded, it was really weird. For me in the early days when I was really trying to quit drinking, although, AA made my drinking worse and all of this associative shit wasn't even a part of it towards the end. Towards the end, I was just trying to escape anxiety and misery and depression and all the other misery and turmoil that was just the constant ordinary day in my life. But I kind of got to thinking about it. It led me down this interesting trip to how many actions do I take and how many things do I do that's just me reacting from programmed behavior that I've cultivated through a lifetime of habits. And I think one of the things that inspired this video for me was I've been trying, I haven't made it to 100% commitment to not smoke any longer, but I have been trying to limit the use of tobacco, and I've been noticing how, like, if the phone rings, I immediately reach for a cigarette, because when I'm talking on the phone, I got to smoke. Or when I step outside, I immediately reach for a cigarette. Or when I'm driving home from work, the first thing I got to do is I got to reach for a cigarette. You know, it's these little habits, these little cultivated habits that I kind of wonder. I wonder how much of that played a role in my habitual drinking. You know, but I was never given a chance to examine that, you know, in the rooms of AA, because, well, AA just fills your head full of cult dogma. I don't think I ever had a chance to actually sit and focus on, you know, hey, what is making me want to do this? What is making me want to do that? You know, because AA doesn't give you an answer for that. AA tells you, well, it's because you're an alcoholic, because you're a bad person, because you're immoral, because your instincts gone awry, because you're all this other horse shit. And I really don't think AA does anything for you except make you change one habit. Okay, it's Friday night and I got to go get loaded, to it's Friday night and I got to be on the phone with my sponsor and I got to sit in a meeting and I got to feel some good old-fashioned religious guilt for me being such a bad person because I did all of this stuff. There's no way to get to so-called... It used to make me cringe inwardly when I would sit in meetings and they were talking about root causes and conditions. You got to get to the causes and conditions. And I'm like, yeah, but you're never allowed to get to any causes and conditions because you're never allowed to objectively look at your life or look at your behaviors in any kind of way without them telling you what you got to look for, without them telling you, you know, what's wrong with you to begin with. Like, you know, I'm having a bad day today. You know, well, it's because you're in fear. That's because you think you're God. That's because, you know... It was a meme somebody shared in a group the other day that said you can't have a normal conversation any longer when the cult gets into your head too much. Like, it shows a cartoon figure, and there's one cartoon figure that says, you know, I'm feeling a little bit cranky today. And then the other cartoon figure was like, that's because you're not letting go and letting God. That's because you're living in fear. Future events appearing real, and all these other fucking, you know, thought-terminating cliches. I saw a meme for that not too long ago, like when they say one day at a time, or when they say fear is the opposite of faith, or when they say, you know, whatever it is, it's a thought-terminating cliche. It's designed for you not to think, for you not to examine yourself any further, for you not to look at anything. You just know that you're supposed to think. The slogan. But it was something I noticed when I kind of went down that rabbit hole at the time when I was reading Proust about that, how many things that I was doing in life that had to do with acquired behavior through years of habits. And it was really a funny experience when my first October rolled around, when I was truly not drinking any longer. I had done left the cult. I had done left, you know, I had done left all that. I was convinced I was never really going to quit drinking anyway. I was pretty much convinced I was going to get drunk and die. And I'm sure AA people would have been overjoyed at me doing that. But it was in October, and I was kind of feeling that urge. You know, I said, I haven't drank bourbon in years. I've been a half-gallon-a-day vodka guy when I'm not in withdrawal or in a hospital or in jail or in drug court or something, you know. I don't know why I'm still feeling this urge to go to get me a half-gallon of bourbon, you know, in October. But I actually went and walked around this silly little corn maze thing, and I went to this little event. It was called Nightmare Circus. It was not too good, not too great, but it was something to do around October. I had a little money that year. It's amazing how much money I actually saved when I was able to get off the booze altogether. But I kind of replaced sensations in my mind so that, you know, the next time October rolled around, for some reason I wasn't thinking about the taste of bourbon. I was thinking about those things or something like it. I mean, the cravings and the memories are still there, but they're of course nowhere near as strong as they used to be. But they're not ingrained in me in a way that AA ingrained it into me. AA ingrained in me, okay, you're thinking about bourbon in October. That's because you're selfish and self-centered and driven by 100 forms of fear and all this other bullshit, when in truth, you're probably just having a craving because you're trained to have a craving by your own addictions and your own habits and your own behaviors, you know. I hope I'm actually conveying what I'm kind of trying to say with this, but, you know, talk about associated memories. Here's an associated memory. Every time I say in a video, I hope I'm conveying this in the right way. I always think about that scene in Taxi Driver where De Niro's kind of starting to fall apart, and he's kind of getting a little bit closer to becoming a, you know, unhinged lunatic. But he talks to the character Wizard outside. He's like, oh, you know, I've never talked to you much, but I heard you're the guy to go to when you got problems. He's like, yeah, that's why they call me Wizard, you know. And he says, I mean, I'm feeling, like I need to do something. I don't know. I just need to do something. And Wizard's like, well, you get a job, you do a job, and you become the job. And, I've driven a cab at night for all these years, and I don't own a cab. You know why I don't own a cab? Because I don't want to. Somebody's from Brooklyn, somebody's from Sutton, somebody is born, somebody dies, somebody's a millionaire, somebody's a lawyer. Just go get drunk, go get laid. I mean, there's nothing you can do about any of it anyway. And at the time, De Niro looks at him and he says, well, that's the dumbest thing I ever heard. And at the time I was thinking, well, actually, he's making sense. He's kind of making sense in an existentialist, fatalistic kind of way. There's nothing you can do about it anyway. You do what you do. But the response he gives to him is what I think of when I'm making these videos, and I don't really feel I'm conveying it. The response he gives him when he says, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. He says, well, what do you want? You want Bertrand Russell? I mean, I'm a fucking cab driver. What do I know? I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. And that's kind of what I feel like whenever I try to delve into something a little bit more deeper on these videos. Like, I'm talking about Proust and cravings and addictions and programmed behavior. But, what do you want? You want Bertrand Russell? I'm just kind of telling you, what do I know, right? But it was something interesting that was playing around in my mind when I had a day off and some downtime. And I said, I don't know if throwing this out there helps anybody in terms of, maybe curbing their own addictive behaviors or their own anxieties or whatever it is. But I just thought I'd see if maybe anybody got anything out of that. One other thing I wanted to throw out here before I forgot about it is for a long time, during my drinking days when I was really hopelessly hooked on booze, but even before then, when twilight would roll around, when I'd see the sun start to go down, I'd get this terrible feeling of anxiety. I'd get this really terrified feeling of, another day is over. I don't know if I'm going to be able to pay my bills this month. I don't know how long I'll live. I don't know if I'm going to die or not. I don't know if something terrible is going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to lose my house or lose my car. All these kind of thoughts would just start rolling through my head every time the sun would start to go down when it was nightfall. And of course, for a long time, I'd have the booze to mitigate that. But it was an interesting thing because I actually took a long objective look at that. I even made a joke out of it to myself to try to curb it. I would say, well, it's about 7 o'clock in the evening. It's time for your 7 o'clock panic attack. It was kind of like when I would wake up in the morning. I used to wake up in the morning and the first thing I would think is, well, the day's ahead of me. I don't know what could go wrong. I could die. I could be killed. I could be robbed. I could find out I have cancer. Something terrible could happen between now and nightfall. And when I was thinking about that, I remembered how often in my life, because I grew up in a very volatile type of environment with a lot of stress and with a lot of anxiety, I wondered how much that might have played in my drinking, or in my addictions, as well as other things that played in my addictions, like my OCD. I could do another video on that entirely, but I'm not going to try to tie it into this one. I think I've talked way too long about absolutely nothing. But it occurred to me that those anxieties, I don't know if I developed those over years of habit or inherited those, but I know I grew up seeing people worried, and I grew up seeing people anxious and afraid and upset and constantly in turmoil for as long as I can remember in life. I think that these things are just cultivated habits that I developed over a lifetime of just repeatedly doing them over and over and over again. Anyway, that's about 18 minutes and 38 seconds of talking about cravings and repeated behaviors and addictions and Marcel Proust of all things. But what do you want? You want Bertrand Russell? What do I know? I'll see you next time. I think next time I want to talk about amendments, and I want to talk about a couple of other AA related topics. But until then, this is one about cravings and addictions.